The other problem, that we have, Crystal, is a doddering president who seems to just say whatever is at the top of his mind. Now, look, I'm not saying that what he said isn't true, which is obvious. Put this up there on the screen. China is freaking out after Joe Biden called Xi Jinping, quote, a dictator. They say that the president's, quote, absurd comments threaten to undermine efforts to improve Sino-U.S. relations. It actually happened at a campaign fundraiser on Tuesday at the very moment. So before a bunch of rich donors, at the very moment that his own Secretary of State is in China, says, quote, what a great embarrassment for dictators when they didn't know what was happening. He was talking at a private home in California. After the comments were leaked, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that they were, quote, extremely absurd, irresponsible, seriously violate basic facts, diplomatic protocols, and China's political dignity. Now, listen, obviously Xi Jinping is a dictator, okay? But this kind of gets back, or Putin is a war criminal. We've gotten this before.
Yeah.
The thing is that when you're the president of the United States, your comments should be calibrated to actual policy. Just talking off the cuff, without any plan, specifically when your Secretary of State is or at least in the airspace of the country, you just look like a fool.
Yeah.
And it's like, what is your policy here? What are we actually talking about? This is a thing I can't stand with the Biden administration. President Biden's like, yeah, we're going to defend Taiwan. I'm like, do you understand what you're saying? Like, do you actually understand what you're saying? Look at the deployment of our military resources. I was just reading 2 days ago, the CEO of Raytheon says, listen, we're never going to be able to get our supply chains out of China. So you're like, wait, hold on a sec. So if we go to war with China, then you're saying that you actually can't produce any weapons here in the United States. Are we understanding this? So what is the policy? And then the president of Secretary of State on Chinese soil says, we don't support Taiwan independence. That's not a policy change per se, but it's a rhetorical gift to the Chinese. But then Biden is like, oh, but he's a dictator. It's like, what are we doing?
It's completely undercuts
what's
it
happening?
at the same moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, look, if we want to take a hawkish approach, that's fine. Let's debate that. Let's actually plan for it. Let's have a whole of government approach towards it that may be serious. But this seesaw, come back and forth, like I want to appear tough on my own soil, but I'm also going to try and get climate concessions or whatever crap that the people like John Kerry want to get out of them. It's incoherent, and actually it creates uncertainty such that the Chinese themselves, we've talked about this in our last show. There are many different factions in the Chinese government. One faction, Xi Jinping and mostly a part of them, thinks the U.S. wants to destroy their entire country. And they think it's existential and they want to fight back accordingly. Things like this only give them more fuel.
Yeah.
Then the diplomatic side, which Blinken was just engaging with while he was over there, they're like, no, see, we can work with them. We can avoid this. Let's just all, we're all making a lot of money. Let's just keep it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are sending so many mixed signals that they have no idea what the actual policy of government is. And each side can basically point to whatever else is going on as incoherence. And that causes a lot of uncertainty and damage potentially in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, if you are Chinese officials looking at the statements of Blinken on the same day, basically, as these statements from Biden, they don't know if this is just a gaffe and a bumble and him just having verbal diarrhea.
Exactly.
They don't know if this is an intentional statement of provocation to directly undermine the comments that were made, publicly by Blinken. They don't know. Neither do we, by the way.
Yeah,
we don't know either. We don't know what the official policy is, what the official view is. The reporting suggests there's a real tug of war within the administration. And you have Biden now multiple times undermining what seems to be the more carefully crafted, strategic, tactical direction of the State Department as headed by Tony Blinken. And he'll just go off and, shoot off at the mouth, whatever he feels like saying in this very, imprudent.
It's honestly Trumpian.
It is very, I was thinking the same thing. And, that was something that we said before Biden even came into office, that actually Trump and Biden on foreign policy, they have some similarities because there's no real overarching view. It's all about how they feel and their personal relationship with this or that leader and their narcissistic belief in their own ability to navigate and cut a deal, et cetera. And so it is a very Trumpian feeling moment. And then it's just the grotesque nature of when he gives his most unvarnished views is behind closed doors with a bunch of the super rich funding the Democratic Party. That is grotesque as well. But you see from this why it is that his aides keep him under wrap. It's not only because they're worried about political damage and the country really being able to assess the nature and extent of his potential mental decline, but also because they're worried about stuff like this with massive global implications for our nation and for foreign affairs.
It reminds me of President Biden when he said that the prospect of Armageddon is the highest since Cuban Missile Crisis, which he said to whom? Rich Democratic donors in New York City. Outside of, and I remember, I think I tweeted this at the time. I said, if the president of the United States believes that the risk of nuclear war is higher than the Cuban Missile Crisis, we need an Oval Office address now, yesterday, immediately. You need to lay out your policy in Ukraine, how you are going to get this away. But no, they're not doing that. They, you know, behind closed doors. So I read an interview once with President Obama. I'm no fan of Obama. A lot of people here know that. But I did respect that he understood the gravity of his words. And he said, every time I open my mouth, I have to understand that what I say has implications around the world, to the stock market, to, you know, to normal everyday people, to my opponents, and to my supporters. And thus, I always think before I open my mouth. That's not something that we got from Trump, obviously. Some people find that refreshing. And in a, you know, political context, I can understand that, but we still have to understand the gravity of the office that these people hold. So just like the war criminal comment with Putin, I'm like, what are you saying, man? Are you saying you will never have normal relations with Russia again? Because that's pretty crazy. You need to understand what we're saying here.
That's right.
You know, same here with China. I'm like, well, okay, you can say that, you can piss them off, and we can all get into a pissing contest, but what about like trade? What are we?
Where do we go from here?
What are our bilateral relations around economics? Because last I checked, we're actually importing more from China than at any time ever before. So is that the policy? Are we decoupling? Are we de-risking? Like, you know, all of these nonsense terms that just get thrown out of there. And the lack of seriousness, it will leave us tremendously vulnerable. It's not a joke, because the incoherence opens up, you know, as I said, the danger that the Chinese can take any action and think that it's justified. You know, we learned this also during the Pelosi Taiwan visit. The Chinese were like, we don't understand how she can just go and defy you. They're like, we don't believe you.
Right.
They're like, we think that you're sending her. He's like, we're separate, you know. And they're like, yeah, we just don't buy it.
I didn't really buy it either, to be
honest.
Yeah,
I didn't particularly buy it, but I'm saying like they have no understanding of separate but equal branches of government, like literally at all. So you always have to think like, what about the eye of the beholder? What does that look like? What are the consequences? And are we willing to pay them? These are all very, very important.
Well, and lastly, adding to the gall of what is revealed to wealthy donors versus what is revealed to the American people, we also got at least his most extensive comments about the intelligence around the whole spy balloon situation. That was the context in which he was talking about it, where he described Xi as a dictator. He said that's what's a great embarrassment for dictators when they didn't know what happened, claiming that Xi had no idea what was going on with this balloon. And so he said the balloon was blown off course up through Alaska, down through the US. He didn't know about it. When it got shot down, he was very embarrassed. He denied it was even there. So those are also the most extensive comments we've gotten about at least his interpretation of the intelligence report. So again, you know, listen, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but this is why you need to have debates. This is why you need to have, you know, a president and other politicians who are willing to sit for real interviews with real journalists and field hard-hitting questions and, you know, do press conferences and all of those things, because American people deserve to hear these things from the president and not have to get it secondhand from a fundraiser. They deserve to see pushback on, okay, well, what is, if Blinken is saying this and you're saying that, like, what is the actual policy and where do we go from here? And increasingly, it's not just Biden, it's Trump too. It's basically, you know, a lot of modern politicians who feel like we don't have to do that anymore. We can just communicate through social media. We can just go on friendly channels. Why would we want to subject ourselves to the rigors of a debate or the rigors of a difficult political interview, as Trump subjected himself to that this week with Brett Baer, when I could just go on and get softballs from, you know, some like 20-year-old TikToker or whatever.
It's pathetic.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.